Celia, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Your book, He'll Be Okay, Growing Gorgeous Boys into Good Men. What led you to write this book?
I was persuaded to do a project, the Good Man Project, which was talking to boys in boys' schools. And in a nutshell, that came out of my experience in prison, a deep concern about how many of our New Zealand boys go to prison not on a deliberate quest, but on a quest to prove they're men. Yeah. So I became curious about the rites of passage for men, because at that time I was raising a boy. And then the project was great, and there was some murmurings from the publishers that I should write a book, and I kept saying no. I didn't think there was a book in it. Until one day I sat in a plane and listened to a woman interact with her husband about the boy that was sitting next to them. Mm-hmm. And in that moment I thought, I think I'll write the book.
So, I mean, this, in some ways, the title of the book suggests that it's a book to reassure particularly mums, perhaps, of teenage boys.
Oh, absolutely. And there's two parts to the title. The He'll Be Okay. A strong realisation for me that in the years of raising a boy as a single parent, I was divorced and had 2 children, that in the worst of the moments, the terror for mothers, and I don't know any mother that doesn't have this, is as he comes towards the latter part of adolescence, you know, starts to get his freedom. We spend a great deal of time wondering if he's going to live. We go to crisis all the time. So I remember that feeling of the immense vulnerability that literally boiled down sometimes to the internal challenge, did I have the strength to bury this boy, should that be necessary? Because all around me there's information about boys dying. They die on roads, they die in fights, and they die at their own hand. So huge information that says, actually, we're lucky to get them through.
And you'd seen I suppose, the negative side of this through your experience in the prison service.
And many, many young men in prison are not there because they woke up one day and thought, I think I'll go to prison, but because they make 30-second decisions. So all I wanted was someone to look at me. I realised that I would have, if another woman could have looked at me and smiled and said, he'll be okay. The second part of the title, The Growing Gorgeous Boys, I had some argument with the publishers. They didn't want the word gorgeous in there. But in a way, the boys that I fronted it, we all think our boys are gorgeous, and fronting them en masse in boys' schools. They're just gorgeous. I mean, they're annoying, frustrating, messy, smelly, disorganised, lazy on occasion, but they're gorgeous. And so the gorgeous word is crucial that we hold on to it.
Tell us more about the Good Man Project. This is something which, well, from my understanding, you almost got tricked into doing.
Almost tricked into doing. I'd a man who's now the headmaster at Manurewa High was running Nelson College, and we had a conversation. I was doing some other work in Nelson, and he approached me, and we had a conversation, and I talked about what they did in boys' schools, that I was curious about what they'd done. I sent my boy to a single-sex boys' school, but I still had a lack of understanding about what the overarching, you know, what they did and their rites of passage. You know, that was my challenge. What do you do inside these schools? What do boys do? And he said, I aligned it with prison, and he got a bit interested in why I did that. And he said, why don't you come and talk to the heads of boys' schools? Okay. And, you know, initially I said no, but he persuaded me. And I went and talked to them, and then he said, I think you should go and let's have a go at going and talking to boys and see what boys tell you. And it started off with 6 schools, and who were kind of involved but no real sense of what they were doing, and then it just looped up, and in the end it was 25 schools. Talked to a hell of a lot of boys and just asked them about their world, sex, drugs, rock and roll. What is it like to be a boy in today's world? What do you see? What do you think a good man is? When do you think you'll be a man? Tell me about girls. What about your mother? You know, how many of you want to be like your dads? The thing that really amazed me, and that's why I'm so passionate now about women stopping talking and, you know, letting boys think, giving them time to think, is I watch with interest in the media how much time we spend trying to hypothesise about what it is that boys need. Yeah. And every time I spoke to them, I realised that they know what they need. It requires an adult's wisdom sometimes to come in underneath and turn what they're telling you into something, but they have the most extraordinary wisdom. And my conversations with them about drugs and alcohol, often about sex, and it led that, in the nicest possible way, they're much simpler creatures than we imagine. Yeah. But the simplicity is imbued with this extraordinary wisdom, and we need to learn, you know, to take our dilemmas to them and ask them, because they do have the most extraordinary insight into the world.
What were your perhaps preconceived ideas about the project as you got involved in it, or the world of boys' schools in particular?
And boys' schools I'd imagined were paramilitary, over the top, disciplinarian, antiquated. For example, I remember walking in and sometimes in the early stages being overpowered in some of the older boys' schools with imagery that was of the world gone by. So I can think of a school that had photos of the men who had been at the school who'd become soldiers, so there were memorials to soldiers, there were photos of lawyers and photos of judges, and part of my egalitarian view of the world is inclined to make me want to put my fingers down my throat about that stuff. And so there was, you know, initially there was a sensory reaction to that, and I just kept quiet. Gradually I came to understand that actually boys love that. Boys love tradition, they love ritual, they love hierarchy. So it's like one of the things that I began to get an intuitive sense of is when a boy walks in to a boys' school that has that history, he almost sees a banner that says, "Welcome to the world of men," that you two will be here one day and you're coming in. So there was this acknowledgement of the boys' delight in looking up and saying, I'm part of something bigger than me. And that, I think that's one of the things that I've now understood about men. Men have a natural drawing towards being something bigger than themselves. So my sense of manhood is a continuum, and one of the expressions that I heard from a man when I asked when he became a man was when he said, when my father died and his mantle settled on me, and he would have been 55 when his dad died. So so that's that continuum, and we think manhood's an entry point, but it's actually a series of entry points into this continuum.
To an extent, though, it is very much the boys to men phase of a particularly high school. That, you know, these little boys with squeaky voices go to school, and then these sort of knuckle-dragging grunters sort of emerge
at the other end,
partway through. And particularly for a parent, it can be quite distressing to say, well, you know, what's happened to my lovely little boy?
I think the image I have is that he walks his way. There's a couple of images in there. One is that what I see for a lot of adolescent boys for a long time is they exit the doorway to boyhood and they run towards the doorway to manhood. But they come back and forward like that. So one minute he's the sensible, articulate boy. Next minute he's a complete moron, doing something absolutely, you know, you're struck dumb at the stupidity of what he just did. So there's that image, but there's also, in the modern world, there's this continuum of climbing to a plateau and resting for a while and climbing to the next plateau. So, because one of the conversations I had is that I couldn't get over the wisdom of year 13s. Like, they were just divine. They were just seriously gorgeous boys. And someone said to me and reminded me, yeah, but if they're so good then, you know, what happens next? And I said, well, because I mean, I remember that too, you know. He does 19, he can go back to doing some moronic things. So it's like he gets to a plateau as year 13, he looks around, he's the top of this pile, and he breathes and he responds to that, and then he steps off and goes around the moron complex again. And they start to come seriously out of it about 25, you know, in my view, and cross into manhood. This is talking to other men, they cross into manhood about 30. The final pieces of manhood arrive at around 30. So, but that's just a woman's view. It's kind of trying to understand that process.
And perhaps some of us never grow up in that regard. I mean, society generally, though, there's a lot of negative male stereotypes around, and perhaps a lack of positive male role models for boys growing into men to look up to. Yeah,
and we can talk about the people's heads will instantly go possibly to the gangs and the men who are in prison and that. But I'd want to come back over here, into let's, you know, an average middle class, and in terms of what I saw on the plane that led me writing the book, and then saw something in a cafe as well. What I think the biggest issue is for our boys is that from an early age, and this is for all boys, they're observing men give in to women. And I'm a feminist, so it's kind of, you know, counterintuitive to talk about that, but I cannot ignore it, because I see it all the time where he, for whatever reason, and we can talk about whether it's for the sake of peace or for the sake of his sex supply, he gives in to her. So, and it's even little things like where to sit in a cafe. He'll go to sit down and she'll direct him to another chair. In an airport, he will knowingly follow her in the wrong direction to the wrong checkout counter, knowing that she's soon going to learn that that is the wrong checkout counter. And he knows the correct one's over there, but he doesn't say. Now, he does that for his own reasons. He just doesn't want to stir the pot, doesn't want to have an argument with her, doesn't want the implications of telling her she's wrong. But the real issue for me is that little boys are watching this all the time. So I constantly pick up, perhaps the way to take you as strongly as I can into it, is the boy, when I said, how many of you want to be like your dad? And not many did, and I pushed the conversation a bit further, and he looked up and he said ever so calmly, I don't want to be like my dad. He lacks the courage of his convictions. He will not stand up to my mother. And you see what he's doing? Now that's not the wrong. We can console ourselves about the men who are absent and in prison. Yeah. This man is absent anyway. Stand up to her. So the boys need those role models, and they need to see men claiming what it is to be good men. They need to see men who stand secure in their maleness, whatever that is.
So in some ways this book was written as a call to women to step back, to allow their boys to grow into men, and also a call for men to be the role models they're meant to
stand up. When I talk to audiences, the two messages are for her, step back and be quiet, trust yourself and trust this boy, that to be a good man he has to let you go. But the message for fathers is stand up where your boy can see you. Let him, even if it means you get into some trouble. Push for doing things where women are kept out. Push for male-only space, for male-only conversations. But push for yourself. Create the space. Stand up and be clearly visible wherever this boy looks, that he can see his dad.
My guest today is Celia Lashlie, the author of the book He'll Be Okay, Growing Gorgeous Boys into Good Men. We'll be back with more on this topic in just a moment. My guest today is Celia Lashlie, talking about her book He'll Be Okay, Growing Gorgeous Boys into Good Men. Celia, we were talking about the education system, and in particular there's a perception that it's a female-dominated area, that there's a strong female perspective there. Is it tough for boys to succeed academically, do you think?
I can imagine people's immediate response to that, but my personal view is yes. I think the thing we have to acknowledge, and it's particularly prominent in primary schools, there's a number of issues that are threaded in there, but the end result for me is that I think there's a feminisation not only of the curriculum but of the environment. So the voices the boys hear are women. Many boys in this country will come through primary school and never have a male teacher, or they have one standout male teacher somewhere in the process, but many will have none at all. And the combination that means is that at home there's often women, and then at school there's women, and then when you get into the area of behaviour management, psychologists, social workers, all women. So there is a culture. The thing that I find interesting for me, I keep talking about my culture, that the education system is dominated by me, and me is white, middle class, well-educated women. Mm-hmm. Now, we think we're neutral in this country because we have conversations about Pacifica, about Māori, about other cultures. There's kind of an interesting thing that we women do, which I think is that we assume we're the neutral ones, mm-hmm. and so we don't realise we have a culture, and yet we have a very strong culture. We have a culture about how we interact. We have a culture about how we communicate. And often boys are lost inside that communication. So we talk at boys, we say things 4 times. I watch young teachers that they think teaching is to talk, and you can see boys' ears hurting. They have no idea what she's saying to them because she's talking in quite a high voice because she's quite young, and it gets hard. So, in many ways, the values of women, the way of women's communication, has become the norm, and that leaves boys struggling. And the thing that I'm saddest about is the boys express the feeling of feeling wrong. And when I said to them, what do you mean wrong? And they just said, there's just a feeling that we're always wrong, that we're too noisy, we're too messy, we're not tidy enough in our work. So I've had some examples of a teacher comparing work, a boy getting 97% in a maths test and the mother being called in to talk about the quality of his work because it was untidy. And the teacher showed the parent a tidy girl's maths test. Well, it was a maths test. He got 97%. Yeah. So the analysis of the heart of the matter for me is the analysis, and I keep talking to teachers about it, analyses this good boy's behaviour or bad behaviour, And what many women do is, because it's inconvenient, because it annoys us, because they won't sit still, we classify what is actually boys' behaviour as bad behaviour. And it goes up from there.
As well as just, I suppose, the academic achievement side of things, the way in which this affects boys not only doing well academically but surviving adolescence. What you talk about is crossing the bridge of adolescence. What do you mean by that term?
I mean that he has to... it seems to me that there is a bridge of adolescence, and the thing that he needs to go across it is women. I've now, capitulated that some women are allowed on the bridge, but they have to let go his hand, and we have to stand back a bit and let him move ahead of us. And of course, there's 1,000 examples in my head, but the sort of thing is, if there are men around a boy, if you watch men interacting with boys, there's 1,000 signals. Quiet. There's an eyebrow raised. There's a hand signal. There's a that sort of motion. And the boy gets it. But inevitably, whenever I see that communication happening, there's always a woman's voice just behind it. One boy delightfully, told his mother comes in 7 times to tell him to get out of bed every morning. And I said, what do you do? And he said, I lie there and count them. Whereas a father would look at the boy the night before and say, you better be in the car at 8 o'clock, mate, or you're walking to school. Yeah. So there's 1,000 ways, and that bridge needs to be clear of women's clutter. And we can be on it, but there are the image I now have is you can sit on the side and watch him, but he should be surrounded by men.
So what you're saying essentially is one of the most difficult things for a young boy to become a man is his mum trying to help him through adolescence.
Yeah. And women, and she can't. And I know how women struggle with that idea. What do you mean, let him go?
This is my lovely
This
little
is
boy.
my boy. Yeah. And yes, he is, and he's going to take a break from you for a while, and then he's going to come back. I mean, we have to acknowledge the fear. That's the challenge of mothers with boys. So it's not downplaying that in any way. It's not, that this isn't true. But from an early stage, the 2 parts that I keep talking to mothers about is link action and consequence as early as you can. So let him have a sense that he is in control of his world to a degree. So even little things, even as a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, there's that sense of saying, if you do this, this will happen, and letting it happen. I'm thinking of some examples with the grandsons. So if you do that, you'll lose 5 minutes of the half an hour you're allowed on the iPod, right? And so he does it, and he loses it. And he gets really angry, gets mad that he's lost the 5 minutes, and then he works to earn it back. Now, he's at 4, he's processing information in and out about, so if I do this, if I don't go and pick up my pyjamas and put them in the laundry basket like Mummy or Nana just asked, I'm going to lose 5 minutes, right? Now, there's no harm done to him, or either way. But if you don't do it, then my sense is that he gets to 17 and he's suddenly able to do stuff, and he hasn't learnt the art of decision making. And so he gets into a car, having had 1 beer when he shouldn't, crashes the car and kills his best mate. I'd rather he learns about, losing 5 minutes on the iPod than standing in a police cell knowing that he's responsible for the death of his best friend. So I keep saying to women, I'm not making this up, this is serious stuff. He's got to learn decision making, and I don't want him to learn the first decision making when he's 17, because by then he's making really dangerous decisions. The thing I want mums to think about is that when they stop doing this stuff, stop babysitting him, stop wiping his nose literally or metaphorically, they then have the space to grow themselves, to be strong enough to be the mother that he needs. The image I want to give mothers is that when your boy steps away from you, instead of following him, our job is to stand up, reaffirm who we are, what our values are, what our beliefs are, and stand solid. Because the image I've got of the gift you give your boy then is that when he goes out and starts playing around, he can turn his head like this and see his mum standing tall, and she becomes a reference point for him, a touchstone. My mother wouldn't like this. That isn't as clear as that sometimes, but if you follow him and make his lunch and pick up that shirt off the floor in his bedroom because you're going to be cross on Saturday, then you're actually not helping him. And I want what I would have is a sequence of things that every term, certainly every year of secondary school, but every term, as the holidays come to the end, you negotiate one further task that you don't do for him. So from here, now I don't do your lunch, now I don't take you to school, or I don't do any washing that's not in whatever. But each term, actually have the negotiation. Here's an alarm clock. I'm not going to wake you up again any mornings. You want to get, you're late at school, you deal with school. So that sort of stuff, And I just think it means, I want women to have fun, stepping back, have some time, go and have a coffee, let him do his stuff.
The role of dads in all of this, and in particular mums, allowing dads to be dads so that the boys can become men and not shouting out instructions about how she would have done it if she was in that situation, and just biting your tongue. That can be a tough one.
Yes, it can be a tough one, and it is literally, there's that sense of just reminding yourself to pull the zip across your mouth and don't say anything. I keep encouraging mothers to actually watch men, because once you start to realise that the communication is there, you can laugh more, because you can actually, there's some astonishing exchanges, but men do have to. As we said before, men have to stand up, men have to claim their space, and they have to insist sometimes. Actually, and maybe once a week or whatever, we're going out and you're not coming. We're going to do some men things, and it may involve dirt and it may involve dangerous activity, but and we'll tell you as little of it. So her job is then when they come back in, not to say, so what did you do? Where'd you go? Who'd you see? It's simply, did you have a good time? Yep. Get those dirty clothes on and put them in the washing machine. So, it's that, there needs to be, we need to recognise that they're boys. Yep. That's the prime issue, that they're boys and they're going to grow into men. I don't think many women make that connection. I think they see men and they see their boy, and they don't actually work out, actually, he's one of them. So you are rude about them, derogatory about them, you're being derogatory about him. And women are often, oh no, not my boy. He's different. No, he's not. He's exactly like them. He's one of those.
The almost stated promise in the book, he'll be okay. Not all boys grow into good men. And you would have seen the dark side of this. Some of them actually won't be okay.
Some of them won't be okay, and some of them won't be okay because they'll go to jail, and some of them won't be okay because they'll die. So it's not so much a promise. For me, to a degree, it's that we can't. It's in trying to hold that he'll be okay, that we actually become the mother that is the best possible option for him. I'm almost inclined to say that it's that there's a point. There's literally a point at which you cross your fingers. I can't take away the cross your fingers business, not in today's world. And the thing is that for me, as the mother of a boy, did I take full cognizance of who he was rather than who I am? I think what it comes down to is, and it's wider than just boys. In the modern world, we've created a mythology that as parents we have to create our children, that we have an obligation. We get this blank canvas and we have to build them. And I'm at the complete opposite belief of that. I believe that when we get a child, our job is to find out who the hell we've got, and to walk with them and beside them while they walk towards their destiny, what they came to do. I think it's in the freedom of that I can get the he'll be okay, but not... the chances are greater if women relax. The irony is that the more women come in on him, I would say, without thinking of any specific woman, the more women come in on him, try and cross-examine him, go through his stuff in his room, try and question him, try and stay ahead of whatever calamity's coming, the more we push him towards the calamity. Because it's in the pushing back. If you don't, it's like a force. I have images of boys that are holding their mothers like this. Leave me alone, go away, stop asking so many questions. And she's exerting force against him. Now, while he's holding her at bay like that, he's not doing the growing in here that he needs to. And so we end up, he does dramatic stuff. I mean, it's for men too. The image I often say to fathers is, I've met boys who the only time that their father's eyes are on them is when he's come to the police cell at 2 a.m. to get him out. And I'm not talking low socioeconomic, I'm talking upper middle class. And if boys actually, even though he knows his father will be angry, if that's the only time he gets his father's eyes on him, he'll just keep going back. Yeah. He'll go back and he'll go back. And he'll live for the moment that the cell door swings open and his father's finally looking at him. And the expression I often have in my head as I watch boys behave that way is the boy's actually saying to his dad, "Can you see me yet?" So it's that, the paradox of parenthood is the being involved for fathers and the stepping back for mothers.
Celia, very much appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.